The opening scene presents a pregnant woman who urgently goes to the hospital during a rainstorm for childbirth. Tragically, she passes away during childbirth, and the doctor informs her husband, Greg, about her passing. He also discloses that their baby has albinism, a genetic condition that results in a lack of pigmentation. Greg is taken to see the baby, who is undergoing a brainwave test. Overwhelmed with grief upon seeing the pale baby, he denies the child as his own. The story then jumps 2 decades ahead, where Sheriff Doug and his team are investigating the recent death of an elderly man at a farmhouse, concluding that it was due to a heart attack. During their search of the house, they discover an underground basement where they find a boy in hiding. Despite their attempts to coax him out, he refuses. Suspecting his fear, Doug calls for the assistance of a child services psychologist named Jessie Caldwell. She arrives shortly and goes to the basement, where she finds the boy hiding in a dark corner. Through Jessie's encouragement, the boy eventually emerges into the light, revealing his luminously white skin. His actual name is Jeremy Reed, but he is nicknamed Powder due to his bright skin tone. It is revealed that Powder has never ventured outside the house. After a while, Jessie inquires why Powder didn't contact the police when his grandfather passed away. He explains that his grandfather warned him he could be taken away if seen, so he stayed away from others. He built a small library for education and memorized all the books he owned, claiming to recite every paragraph flawlessly. Impressed, Jessie hands him a challenging book, typically meant for college students, and asks him to recite a specific page number. Powder recites the first paragraph of that page flawlessly. Following this, Powder accompanies Jessie out of the basement, and she takes him to a boys' hostel, as he is now under state care. At the hostel, the other boys are captivated by his unique appearance, having never seen someone like him before. Later, a gang of bullies confronts Powder during dinner, with their leader, John, demanding that he wear a spoon on his nose. In a surprising turn of events, Powder takes the spoon, manipulates it, and astonishes the boys. They consider him a kind of freak. Meanwhile, Doug returns home and encounters his son, Steve, but their strained relationship is evident as they pass each other without a word. Steve came to check on his ailing mother, Emma, who is bedridden due to cancer. The caretaker tells Doug that seeing their son has brought healing to Emma. Powder enrolls in a high school and attends a physics class, where an apparatus called Jacob's Ladder generates an electric current. Powder starts feeling uneasy and begins to shake as the machine is turned on. It overloads, discharging a powerful bolt of electricity into Powder's chest, causing him to levitate. Donnelly attempts to switch off the machine but fails, finally destroying it with a chair. All students flee the classroom while Powder lies unconscious on the floor. Donald touches Powder, experiencing an unusual sensation that raises his arm's hair and puts him in an altered state. Powder is rushed to the hospital, and Donald describes the incident to the doctor, who is skeptical since such a strong electrical shock should have been fatal or left burn marks. Donald explains that Powder's body undergoes a process called electrolysis, explaining his lack of body hair. A nurse interrupts, revealing that Powder escaped from the hospital by jumping through a window. While walking along the streets, Powder encounters a classmate, Lindsay, and informs her that he can hear people's thoughts, which she attributes to his electric shock. He then heads back to his grandparents' house but is captured by Doug and his co-worker, Duncan. Returning to school, Powder is led to a conference room to discuss his exceptional intellect. The principal reveals his IQ score of over 300, far surpassing the most intelligent person globally. However, Powder requests to return home, but Jessie explains he can't because the house now belongs to the bank. During a school camping trip, Powder sits alone by the bonfire while Doug approaches him to talk. A thunderstorm begins, and Powder mentions his connection to the storm. He believes that when he sees lightning, he feels drawn to it. Powder discloses that his mother was struck by lightning while pregnant with him, which likely led to his unique condition. The next morning, as Powder wanders in the woods, he encounters bullies John and Mitch, with John threatening him with a gun. However, a gunshot in the distance diverts their attention to Duncan, who shot a deer. Powder, empathetic to the deer's pain and fear, causes Duncan to experience those sensations, leading to a confrontation with the bullies. John aims his gun at Powder, but Mitch intervenes, saving him. Subsequently, Powder is brought back to Jesse for questioning about the recent events. She exhibits genuine concern for his well-being and emotional state. However, Powder dismisses her inquiries, expressing a strong desire to return home. When she persists, his frustration mounts, leading to an inadvertent release of his powers, resulting in the shattering of glasses and lights. He then departs confidently, declaring that Jesse won't be able to keep him there for long. Meanwhile, Doug returns home and meets with the family doctor, who updates him on his wife's deteriorating condition and her immense suffering. Despite Doug's inability to comprehend why she holds on, he believes there must be a reason. The doctor informs him that the reason remains unknown, as Doug's wife is entirely unable to communicate. The following day, Powder is seated alone in the dining room when Donald approaches him. The professor reveals that he experienced a distinct energy when touching Powder during a prior incident in class, describing it as immensely powerful, rejuvenating, and linked to Einstein's theory of using 100% of the brain for extraordinary feats. Donald expresses a desire to befriend Powder to gain more insights, and, although initially hesitant, Powder eventually agrees. On the other hand, Doug visits Duncan's place and notices that all firearms have been removed, despite Duncan's strong hunting passion. When questioned, an emotional Duncan shares the traumatic experience of feeling the pain of a deer when Powder transferred it to him. This sensation was extremely distressing, akin to being near death, leading Duncan to forego firearms. Understanding the extent of Powder's extraordinary abilities, Doug devises a plan to use his telepathic abilities to connect with his terminally ill wife. Later, Doug brings Powder to his home and introduces him to his ailing wife, Emma. Powder delves into her mind by gently touching her forehead, conveying her thoughts to the sheriff. Through this telepathic connection, Doug discovers that his wife clings to life due to her desire to pass away, reconciled with their estranged son, Steve, and wearing her wedding ring. She reminisces about a cherished memory from Steve's childhood, when they played together in the snow and she lost her wedding ring. Hearing this, Doug recalls how Steve diligently searched through the snow after school every day to find his mother's wedding ring. Emma reveals that Steve has already found the ring and kept it in a silver box on her nightstand. Moved by this revelation, Doug becomes overwhelmed with emotion as he tenderly places the ring on his wife's finger. Powder then touches Doug's wrist, allowing him to hear his wife's voice. Overcome with emotion, Doug breaks down in tears, embracing his wife and assuring her that everything will be all right. In her final moments, she opens her eyes one last time before peacefully passing away. Shortly after, Steve arrives on the scene and Doug immediately embraces him. The two finally set aside their differences and reconcile after years of estrangement, all thanks to Powder. The scene shifts to a county fair where Powder meets Lindsay. She stands out as the one who treats him no differently. After a brief conversation, Powder unexpectedly touches Lindsay's hands, allowing them to hear each other's inner thoughts. During their exchange, Lindsay learns that Powder's father abandoned him because of his albinism. Touched by his story, she offers comfort and reassurance, describing his face as the most beautiful one in the world. Their interaction becomes the center of attention when Lindsay suddenly kisses Powder. Unfortunately, Lindsay's father also notices the act, leading to a confrontation with Powder and a barrage of hurtful insults. Jesse, who is also at the fair, intervenes, apologizes on Powder's behalf, and takes him away. Later, a dejected Powder gathers his belongings with the intent of escaping back to his farm. However, as he is about to leave, he overhears boys playing basketball. Out of curiosity, he approaches, only to discover it's John and his gang. Despite his reluctance to engage with them, the bully John blocks his path and takes his hat. Instead of using his powers to retrieve it, Powder delves into John's mind, revealing the painful history of abuse by his stepfather. It becomes clear that John's stepfather had previously seized the hat, which had once belonged to his late biological father, subjecting John to the same taunting that he currently inflicts on Powder. Regrettably, this revelation only exacerbates John's anger, leading him to take drastic action. Suddenly, a downpour begins, and John forcefully drags Powder outside, subjecting him to humiliation by stripping him and pushing him into muddy water in an attempt to add color to his pale skin. Unable to endure further degradation, Powder unleashes a potent electromagnetic pulse in a spherical shape, sending all the bullies flying. After a brief moment, everyone recovers, except for John. Concerned, Mitch checks on him and discovers that his heart has stopped, leaving him on the brink of death. Realizing the consequences of his actions, Powder experiences immediate regret and quickly springs into action, administering CPR to revive the bully using his powers. Fortunately, the procedure works, and John is brought back to life. This act impresses all the bullies, especially Mitch, who decides to help him. Mitch assists Powder in discreetly boarding a vehicle bound for his grandfather's farm, enabling him to escape without further trouble. Regrettably, when Powder arrives home, he finds that the bank has seized all his belongings. Shortly after, Jessie approaches him, offering consolation and assuring him that she will find a more accepting and understanding place for him. Donald joins them, and as they prepare to leave, they encounter Doug and Duncan outside. Jessie seeks Doug's support, urging him to let the boy go. Surprisingly, the officer agrees, as Powder has helped him reconcile with his long-lost son. At that moment, a thunderstorm erupts, and Powder begins to run into the field, with everyone following closely behind. Suddenly, a lightning bolt strikes him, engulfing him in a blinding flash of light. The movie concludes as the clouds unleash one final resounding thunderous roar, symbolizing that Powder has ascended to the heavens. If you found this recap helpful, please subscribe for more content, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.